Here we are again. Welcome to percent increase and decrease, or more commonly known as percent of change. So our focus question today, how can you use a percent to represent change? So let's talk about percent of change. A percent of change describes how much a quantity has changed, expressed as a percent of the original quantity. So going back to the formula we've been using, the part equals the percent times the whole. So here's where it's going to change a little bit. So instead of saying part, we're going to use the amount of change. Okay? The percent is now the percent of change, and the whole is still your original quantity. When a quantity increases, the percent of change is called a percent increase. Our formula for percent of change, and you're going to want to star this or highlight this, okay, is equal to the amount of change over the original quantity. So when we look at this first example, we have a flower. It was originally 10 centimeters, and it grew 5 more centimeters, so it increased 5 centimeters. So my percent of change equals my amount of change, which in this case was 5, over my original height, which was 10. So now this 5/10 represents a percent. So the easiest thing for us to do is either reduce it to a half, or remember we need the denominator to be 100. So if my denominator is 100, I multiply this by 10, I multiply this by 10, that gives me 50 over 100, which we know is 50%. So the height of the flower increased 50%. Similarly, when a quantity decreases, the percent of change is called a percent decrease. Same formula. Percent of change equals the amount of change over the original quantity. So here, I have a flower that started out as 20 centimeters high, and it drooped. So, our percent of change here our amount of change, it went from 20 to 15. 20 minus 15 is 5. My original amount was 20 centimeters. Again, because this represents a percent, let's convert it to having a denominator of 100. So I multiply the numerator by 5, the denominator by 5, and multiplying the numerator by 5. The 25 100ths we know is 25%. So the height of the flower decreased my room by 25%. So, let's identify the percent increase in each situation. Okay, remember, our amount of change, we subtract the two numbers, and our percent of increase is equal to our change over our original. So, percent of increase equals my change, amount of change, over my original amount. So for the push-ups, my percent of increase is equal to, I went from 15 to 30, so I changed by 15. And my original was 15. 15 15 over 15 is 1, or 100% increase. When we're doubling, you are increasing your original amount by 100%. For my crunches, equals my difference, 114 minus 100 is 14, over my original 100. This one's easy, we already know that as a percent. It's a 14% increase. Okay, so now we have a pet frog measuring 51 millimeters in body length while sitting. Its body length extends to 89 millimeters while jumping. Find the approximate percent increase in body length of the frog from sitting to jumping. I'll let you set this up, and then we will check it. When I did my math on this, percent of increase equals my change, 89 minus 51, gives me a change of 38 millimeters over my original of 51 millimeters. When I do the math, that is approximately 0.745. And when I convert that to a percent, that means it's approximately 74.5%. Remember to convert from a decimal to a percent, and move the decimal to percent, and move my decimal point over 2 places. Moving right along. The force of gravity on the moon is different from the force of gravity on Earth. This means that an object has a different weight on the moon than it does on Earth. By what percent does an astronaut's weight decrease on the moon? So, percent of decrease, same formula. Amount of change, so 154 minus 25.5 gives me a change of 128.5 pounds over my original was 154 pounds. When I do the arithmetic, I get 0.8344, which converts to 83.44%. So there's an 83.44% decrease in weight. All right, I want you to try the next 2 slides on your own. Okay, let's see how we did. The percent decrease, there's a change of 1 over the original 15. When I do my arithmetic, I get 0.67, which is a 6.7% decrease, and I wrote that wrong. It's a 0, I'm sorry about that. 0.067, which would be a 6.7% decrease. And notice every time I always label it, whether it's an increase or a decrease. Just common practice. For the next slide, the first one, the flower grew, and it was an 82% increase. Okay. For the second one, the balloon deflated, and it was a 46% decrease in the original size. Let's go back to, and it's not letting me go, we'll have to go by hand. There we go. Back to our focus question. How can you use a percent to represent change? A percent represents change by comparing the amount of change to the original quantity. Amount of change is a percent, so the original quantity is the whole. The percent is the percent of change as an increase or a decrease. All right, that's it for tonight. I hope you have a great night, and we'll see you next class. Bye-bye.